Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Goswami, sir. I think can we start?
We can start.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, a very good morning to everyone. It's a great moment for us that the mega event is organized on National Webinar on Modernism in Indian English Literature. I am Dr. Virendra Pal, the coordinator of ICT cell of Assam College Librarians Association and the librarian of Koliabar College. The webinar is organized by the Department of English, Kamrup College, in association with Rao Saheb Gogate College of Commerce and Srimati Saraswati by Ganset Wake College of Arts, Banda, in collaboration with Assam College Librarians Association, ICT cell. I'd like to welcome you all from all these three platforms. And there are some instructions for the participants. Dear participants, if you have any questions, please write in the chat box. Definitely your questions will be taken by the resource persons. Also, if you want to ask directly questions, then also you may raise your hand in the Zoom applications. And please do not annotate anything on the screen, although we have closed it. Also, your participation we will expect till last part of this webinar. With this, I would like to wish best of luck to everyone, and I would like to over to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Goswami, sir.
Namaskar. I, on behalf of the organizers, would like to welcome you all to the National Webinar on Modernism in Indian English Literature. As Dr. Birendra has already mentioned, that this webinar is being organized by Department of English, Kamrup College, Samota, and Rao Saheb Godge College of Commerce and Srimati Saraswati by Gansit Wake College of Arts in collaboration with Assam College Library Associations. I do take it my immense privilege to welcome you all to this webinar. First of all, we'd like to welcome our Honorable Inaugurator, Professor KC Boral, sir. Would like to welcome our resource person, Professor Bibas Chaudhary, sir, Professor Devdulal Haldar. And also I'd like to welcome all the participants who have joined this national webinar. I'm very happy to inform you all that we have 55 university which are participating in this national webinar. More than 350 colleges is participating in this national webinar. Those who have not joined us in the Zoom, they'll be joining live with Facebook and YouTube. So everyone, I would like to welcome once again. I would like to welcome all the people who have submitted their abstract and all the people who have joined us to this event, National Webinar on Modernism in Indian English Literature. Now, I would like to introduce before you Professor KC Boral, sir. I would like to request Virendra Pal to kindly share the screen. I'm going to share his screen of introducing Boral, sir. Professor Kailaschandra Boral, sir, is presently the Vice Chairman of the Executive Council of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, and Professor of Indian Studies and former Pro-Vice Chancellor of English and Foreign Language University, University of Hyderabad. Professor Boral, sir, has authored and edited and co-edited more than 15 books and has more than 45 publications in national, international, journal, and anthologies. His work, Theory After Derrida, has been scheduled for a South Asian edition by Routledge after having been available as an ebook. He is a member of National Committee of Sahitya Academy, UGC SAP, and Visitors Nominee in universities. Professor Kailaschandra Boral, sir, has been awarded Narendra Pradhan Award by American Studies Research Center. He has been also awarded British Council Travel Fellowship by the British Council. Professor Boral, sir, has authored, edited, and co-edited many books, and he has produced scholars. He has scholars everywhere in every part of India. To know more about Boral, sir, all the participants, you may kindly, when you are free, just type Kailaschandra Boral. Even at Sud Ganga, you will find references pouring over in every online platform, informing the credibility of our Boral, sir. So we would like to welcome Professor Kailaschandra Boral, sir, to this national webinar, and I would like to request him to kindly inaugurate the national webinar on modernism in Indian English literature. Over to Boral, sir.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Yeah, I thank the organizing committee, and you have collaborated with 3 institutions and an association. And I also welcome Vibhas, whom I can see here, and Professor Haldar, and the participants to this seminar. I exactly don't know actually what is the job of an inaugurator, because normally in a seminar you light the lamps, and sometimes you get a heavy bouquet and a lot of things. Then inauguration has a feel of it, that the celebration has started. And the technology actually sounds celebration is good. And we have to today do things in a non-celebratory mood, that is precisely to be in a very intellectual way. And I also thank you, because this is my first experience of a webinar. I have never participated in this. Of course, I was giving online talks and everything. This is very interesting. Anyway, first let me inaugurate, because I may forget by the time I complete whatever little speech I have to give. I will inaugurate this webinar, and I wish all the best and wish the success to this particular webinar. And the number is very huge, as I'm told. There are more than 300 participants. And this is a very good mechanism to reach out many people. And I have got a couple of WhatsApp and something. People have written to me saying that we are joining this webinar and we want to hear from you. I don't know what I have to say, that people are so eagerly waiting to hear from me. Anyway, regarding this modernity stuff, I have some problem actually personally, as a teacher of English and as has been doing some kind of research. Modernity in the West is okay, because that is part of a, the whole discourse, how it evolved in the West. And we talk about the project of enlightenment, we talk about other things, the philosophical traditions, and how it evolved and has taken a particular shape in the literary articulations, after the Second World War. That is okay. That kind of modernity is okay. But when we talk about modernity in India, there is some problem. Of course, for me, it may not be for others. Why I'm saying this? I have something very specific to convey. If you meet these days the research scholars in any university, you will find that every third person is doing research in Indian writing in English. Therefore, Indian writing in English has become very popular as an area of study. And of course, if they are little sophisticated, they will say post-colonial studies from Indian, instead of saying Indian writing in English. And of course, it has its carryover to American universities also. You will find that in American universities, each university, even a college, even a community college, has a department called South Asian Literary Studies. South Asia, post-colonial South Asia, Indian writing in English. You will find these are all overlapping categories. And some people actually champion these overlapping categories according to their own specialization or need or whatever. But I have some problem with the kind of research that we do in Indian universities. Either people get too obsessed with the authors they are doing in, or they are too lazy to actually go into a kind of search to different other domains, how this particular area has formulated or how this particular discourse has developed critically. Now, as far as I know, that there was a debate for a while about Indo-Anglian, Anglo-Indian, Indian writing, then Indian writing in English, Indian English literature. There are so many nomenclatures circulated. People debated over it. That is okay. That is passé. But when it comes to modernity, we are not very clear about it. what is Indian modernity? We have used so many things like Renaissance. The word has been used. And in Assam also people are talking about Assamese Renaissance. I'm a little worried about these, borrowed ideas. You see, why I'm talking about this is because modernity first time was used, particularly in the context of colonialism, what is called colonial modernity. It is well defined because in the 19th century, something happened in terms of, starting English education. Then so many new institutions came to India, like railways, postal service, so many things came to India. And there was something, not very much part of the Indian way of life. These are new things that came into India. And suddenly that was a moment of modernity. These things were called modern because this brought in, I'm just particularly underlining this word, a different kind of historical experience. This historical experience is very important, which actually forced us to look at the happenings or the developments around us in a different way. And therefore, in the religious reform, Brahmo Samaj, this thing, that thing, all this stuff came around that time. Because people for the first time took note of, new things as if it were challenging to our consciousness. We cannot stay as we were. We need to take stock of these things. And along with this colonial modernity, there was another expression which was there, but came to be classified or came into use, was called vernacular modernity. See, vernacular modernity is a decisive kind of, literary practice that has actually not only thematically tried to look at Indian society or what we call Indian reality. The modernity as a concept of the West, as it was, processed through what we call vernacular consciousness, or the way the vernacular modernity arrived, it actually helped us to look at things in a different way. And therefore, you look at these early writers like Fakir Mohan Senapati or Premchand or Tagore, some earliest books and all these things. There was a kind of a churning that was going on. And, for the first time, people are talking about suffering, poverty. When in the West, we are talking about, alienation, frustration, all these things. In India, we are not talking about alienation. We are talking about poverty. We are talking about oppression, feudalism. Those, we are actually consciousness that vernacular modernity allowed the people to attack some of the traditional institutions which were, not providing us a sense of understanding of what is the human subject and how human subjects should be treated. And that was a carryover of that to caste, literature, and all those kind of things. Now, this is where I just want to talk about Indian English literature or Indian writing in English, as you say, modernity in Indian writing in English. And this has been theme of many PhD dissertations without understanding the kind of background that I have talked about, how to actually bring in from colonial modernity from a historical perspective to vernacular modernity as a kind of consciousness to look at and challenge and question a lot of traditional things. How do we relate it to Indian English writing? That is the crux of the matter. Now, if you look at this Indian writing in English, it is a very interesting thing that has happened in India, because we dabbled for a while this Indo-Anglian, that kind of stuff, but as English was considered to be an Indian language, like any other vernacular language literature, English literature in India, to me, could be called another vernacular literature. Of course, it started at a particular moment in history, not like other literatures having long years of history. It is yet to, go through those kind of a churning towards the future to have that kind of legacy of history. But I would call it, because why I will call it, because I go by two, three people. You see, in the 70s, if I remember correctly, it was around 76 or so, a book was published by Oxford University Press, edited by R. Parthasarathi. This is about Indian English poets, but the title of the book was interesting, 10 20th century Indian poets. It doesn't write anywhere Indian English poets. Now, this particular, attribute, characteristics that they are Indian poets, because he also included bilingual poets like Kolotkar. Kolotkar was bilingual. Therefore, he precisely titled this book, and he has given a justification for that. The famous quotation people talk about, my tongue in check, that English is no more a constraint, that English could be used for expressing a kind of vernacular consciousness, as it was in case of Kolatkar and many others like Jayant Mahapatra to a large extent, or Keki and Darwala, because they are writing or expressing about their Indian experience. Now, there are other books that came around that time. V.K. Gokok, the Golden Treasury of India, Indo-Anglican Literature 70, Pritish Nandi published one book of his in 1971, but Salim Piradina's book is very interesting. That is a contemporary Indian poetry in English. He has used Indian poetry in English, that was 72. And of course, if you look at one of the very latest book, not very latest, it came out in 1993, A.K. Mehrotra's book, he also follows Parthasarathi, saying that 12 modern Indian poets. But these are the poets, they write in English, but the title of the books are very significant, and we must, think about it, why it is. Because I'm giving a background to that. You see, that, around 38 or something, Kanthapura was written. And before that, or around that time, Rajarao wrote an essay, which I exactly cannot recollect now. It was published in a collection of essays by C.D. Narasimhaya, The Eagle and something like that, I think in that kind of collection. It was called The Caste of English. What is the Jat? What is the caste of English? And this is a very interesting essay, that in which he says, and the part of the writing of that essay has come to the preface of a Kanthapura, that as he talks about English is our language, as Indians we talk fast, we work first, and all those stuff. And English is one of our caste. Now he has defined English in the sociological terms. Now, if we are looking at these poetry anthologies coming around 70s, before that, you will see Indian fiction has already been there as an established genre, because Swami and Friends, Kanthapura, and some other texts were already there before India was independent. That is historically very important. And I pick up one book, Kanthapura. If you look at the register of a Kanthapura, it is not pure English. There was a search, there was a quest to have a pure English. If you want to write in English, you must write like an Englishman. That was the way of looking at it. But Rajarao changed the whole dynamics. He changed everything. And according to me, he combined the vernacular with the English and he created a kind of a unique register that is called Indian English. Of course, these days people don't do research on the changing register of English writing in India. Like I would give you, I think for the participants from Northeast, you will see there is a difference, because the Northeast writers in English are claiming that we are not part of Indian writing in English. We are a different brand, and they're making a claim that this is a, English writers from Northeast. And I go with them, saying that they have created different kind of a register, because you will find there are, issues regarding ethnicity, folklore, so many things get reflected in their work. Therefore, they have created different kind of linguistic register to define their way of writing, or to make them to say that in what way they are different from Indian writing in English. These are the issues we should be very careful. And when I talk about Rajarao, you see, none of the researchers, as I was telling you, follow the issues of development of the so-called Indian English registers in creative writing. And you will see one thing. I will just give you one trend. If you look at, Narayan to, let us say, Bikram Seth, you will find a particular way of development, a particular kind of register, dialogue in that, and there is a particular sophisticated way of communication in the form of writing or in the craft of writing. Whereas Raja Rao, Desani, and you can take Salman Rushdie. You see, this is another trajectory where you will find the whole English syntax is turnaround, chutnification of English, this thing, that thing. And I find that this trajectory is very modern. You may call it the Salman Rushdie postmodern, but it is not the thought, it is not the Indian sensibility, Indian experience that need to be expressed in language that is English, but the Indian way of creating a particular kind of register, literary register to express the Indian feeling. And that has been very well accomplished by Raja Rao. And this is where I must bring in the issue of translation. You see, translation is a major issue because Parthasarathi also talks about this when he has included, Kolatkar's Jejuri. He says Kolatkar has brought in a different kind of style of writing because Kolatkar has had the experience of translating Marathi Bhakti poetry. Therefore, his writing style is almost a confirmation of a Bhakti style of writing, very cryptic, aphoristic type of style he has used in his poetic composition. That is totally unique. You see, that I would say modernity, because it has nothing, you cannot get that kind of style of writing in English. So also the writing, let us say, of a Kanthapura, you don't get that kind of, you cannot call it a pigeon, you cannot call this thing, that thing, because it is a conscious attempt to actually create a different kind of English register for Indian experience, You see, we normally don't discuss these issues because, we always love to pad off so that when you talk about modernity in Indian English writing or in Indian vernacular writing or whatever, you see, we bring so many things from the West without understanding where is that the moment of modernity, the moment of questioning, inquiring our reality, our social situation had actually historically happened. And how have we taken it forward? That is very important. It's not the question of happening, but recognizing that happening. Second thing is, how has it been taken forward? And this is where I'm giving you the example of Indian writers in English and the Northeast writers of English, how they are actually making a separate claim and how language comes to play. Because I will give you one example. You read this lady, what is her name? Arunachal writer, Mamang Dai. You read her works, Mamang Dai's works. You will find she has created a very unique register of English, mixing folk, mixing her English words, and also bringing out a narrative style which is unique to her own culture. It's a tough, it's a complex, but she has done it. And we cannot find another work which could be compared to it. Now, these are some of the issues. We must actually develop a coherent theory of Indian literary modernity. Actually, that is my concern. And I think I just leave you with these few ideas. And if anybody is interested in whatever I have said, or if they have any questions or anything, they can get back to me through email or something like that. I'm ready to explain. And this is one area I personally identify, and I want that this seminar will be productive, and I wish all the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kailash Chandra Boralsa, for inaugurating this.
Kumar Goswami, please mute your device.
So I would like to thank Professor Kailaschandra Boralsa for inaugurating this webinar. I'm sure all the academicians and researchers who are participating in this webinar will be benefited by your inaugural speech. Thank you so much for inaugurating the webinar. And for the participants who have joined late, I would like to inform you that that was Professor Kailaschandra Boralsa. He is the Vice Chairperson of Executive Council of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, in an autonomous body under Ministry of Culture and Government of India. Professor Boralsa, in fact, is presently a Professor of Indian Studies at the English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. He was a former Vice Chancellor of IFLU, and he is a member of National Committees for Sahitya Academy, UGC SAP, and Visitors Nominee Universities. His biodatas and details of his books will be made available in our WhatsApp group and through your mail as well. I'm sure you'll be benefited. All his books are available online. Now, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir. Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir presently teaches in the Department of English, Guwahati University. His book on English, Social and Cultural History, published by Prentice Hall of India, is a very popular book amongst researchers and students across the world. His book, Reading Post-Colonial Theory, Key Texts in Context, published by Routledge, is another very popular book. He has edited 30 books. He has written 73 book reviews. He has 12 chapters in edited books in English. He has more than 5 chapters in edited books Assamese. He has more than 15 journal articles in English and more than 40 journal articles in Assamese. He has written many newspaper articles. He has translated many works, and his lectures and symposiums he is very well known for giving lectures and participating in symposium as a resource person. In many national and international events, Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir has conducted. And for the benefit of the participants, we will be soon uploading his resume through mail and in our WhatsApp group. With these words, I would like to welcome Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir to give the keynote address.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Sanjeev. I'm really privileged to be part of this webinar. And good morning, Boral sir. It was wonderful to listen to you. And the points that you made are extremely pertinent in the context of Indian English writing and the history of Indian English writing. I will, of course, draw on some of the insights that you have presented today. The subject of the webinar today is modernism in Indian English literature. As Boral sir has pointed out, this is a tricky area in terms of the terms that are juxtaposed, modernism and Indian English. I would like to look at certain developments historically and then see how we can evaluate and respond to the whole idea of modernism in the context of Indian writing in English. In the year 1968, two very, very significant articles were published, and they have become historically significant because of the comments that were made at that time. One was by Adil Jusawala. It was called The New Poetry. In fact, he was talking about the emerging writing in English, and it was published in the Journal of Common Literature in 1968. I'll come back to this article. And the other was Indian Literature in English by C.D. Narasimhaya. A reference was made to his writings. That was also in 1968. And both these articles were part of a discussion on Indian writing in English, organized by the Journal of Common Literature. Now, both these two writers took very interesting positions. Jusawala began by saying that to talk about Indian writing in English or Indian poetry in English is to talk about a lot of paradoxes. This is a point that was made by Baral sir, that there are so many areas which do not quite fit in or do not quite smoothly move forward. And he referred to a 1951 publication that was the first book by Nissim Ezekiel. And he said that the writing before, the poetry before Nissim Ezekiel was mellifluous, was romanticized. So he took a position which has been taken up by later literary historians of Indian writing in English, to see Nissim Ezekiel as a point of breakage from the earlier writings by writers such as Toru Dutt, Sarojini Naidu, De Rosio. This has, however, been challenged subsequently. Now, the second point in history that I would like to refer to is a 1995 article by K. Chachidanandan. K. Chachidanandan, of course, we know is an eminent writer. He is, as Baral sir said, he's a bilingual writer. And his article was published in the Sahitya Academy Journal, Indian Literature, and it's called On Indian Writing in English. And there he said, he pointed out certain very interesting aspects. The first thing he said is that Indian writing in English is or has been seen to be somewhat different from the vernacular writing. And he says that that has been a stated position among historians, among vernacular literary historians. He went on to argue that I think it is not really feasible or it is not really viable to look at Indian writing separately, as he pointed out that it is the language for many people in modern India. And he said that it is not an either or kind of a situation where you challenge vernacular literature to Indian writing, but the kind of coexistence has become part of modern Indian literary scene. Now, when C.D. Narasimha was talking about the situation in 1968, he made a very interesting point. He said that a language, one may be born in a language, one may have a mother tongue, I speak my language, but it's not necessary that I will be a writer in that language. So a kind of internalization, a kind of inwardness with the fabric, the tenor, the dimensions of a language, that becomes essential for a writer. So C.D. Narasimha pointed out that these are aspects that Indian writers who write in English have acquired, and they have taken it up because they've become proficient, they've learned the craft, and that is something that needs to be acknowledged. Now I move a little forward, come to the present time, and I refer to two articles. One was published in 2015, and the other was published in 2016, both by the same writer. Writer we all know, Anjum Hasan. Anjum Hasan is a writer who started her writing career in Shillong, but now she lives in Bangalore. And both these articles, one, Anjum Hasan, the fiction writer, this was published in the American Review, and the second article, which is published in 2016, is part of A History of Indian Poetry in English, edited by Rosenka Chaudhary, published by Cambridge University Press. In the second article, she talks about the speaking voice. Which is our speaking voice? Indian writers, how do we speak? Which language do we speak? And she talks about the variety of English writing. She points out that there's a difference between the English of Rushdie and the English of Anita Desai or Raja Rao, as Baral sir was talking about. So when we say that we are Indian writers in English, or we're looking at Indian writing in English, we are actually talking about, as Balsa rightly pointed out, numerous literary registers. We're not looking at one kind of writing, but we are looking at multiple aspects of writing in the language, and of course, culturally, so widely diversified. And when we look at these issues, when we take up these issues, and when as Anjum Hasan points out, that this speaking voice, this English voice, is something that struck her, and this is something she talks about in her 2015 article. The article is titled very interestingly, provincializing, self-fashioning provincialism. So she talks about that she was born in Shillong, brought up in Shillong, and then she shifted to Bangalore. And how the whole idea of India being provincialized in terms of the whole dimension of colonial modernity, and her provincialization when she shifted to Bangalore and looking at Shillong differently. So these nuances that she writes about in her novels and how she crafts them in her poetry show us that from 1968 to 2020, Indian writing in English has moved in different dimensions and has come to acknowledge these different registers of culture that have become part of our social life or understanding of literature that we know today. I would, at this point, refer to a particular novel which was published last year. And I would like to draw your attention to the kind of writing that has come out and the kind of writing that has actually widened the genres of Indian English writing. This novel was titled, it came out in 2019, it was titled Kohinoor Express. It was written by a first-time novelist, but he's not a novelist only, because he is also a playwright. He is a scriptwriter, primarily a Bollywood scriptwriter. His name is Rensil de Silva. And Kohinoor Express is set in the time of the British era. It is about the Kohinoor diamond and an attempted theft of the Kohinoor diamond to be stolen from the British Army because it is being taken to England. And the whole idea is the attempt to take the diamond and keep it in India. And it is similar. I found these stories similar in terms of orientation to a V. Shantaram movie, which you must have all watched, Do Aake Bara Haath, that there are some prisoners who are taken and then they are given the task of doing the job. What I found interesting about this novel, Rensil de Silva's Kohinoor Express, is that it belongs to a very, very new genre in Indian writing, something that is also done by Ankush Saikia, who writes about these crime thrillers. Now, this is a very pacey, very racy thriller. And it has introduced something which is new in Indian writing, because when we look at the writings of R.K. Narayan, or when we look at the writings of Raja Rao or Mugraj Anand, that India, that picture of India that we get, and this India that we find in writings like these, show that, of course, we have different snapshots of Indian society emerging in fiction, in poetry, and in the theater. Now, another aspect which is not often highlighted in relation to Indian writing in English is the genre of non-fiction writing. And in this case, we find that we can actually take the whole frame of modernity, not keep it to 1960s, but move it backwards, because we see that from the time of the freedom struggle, and when we talk of Indian non-fictional writing in English, we have great writers, Nehru, Gandhi, and all the people involved in the freedom struggle actually wrote in English apart from writing in other languages. But we also have, as Baral sir rightly pointed out, this is something which must be factored in the role of the bilingual writer, the writer who is conversant in multiple languages. One primary example of this is A.K. Ramanujan. And A.K. Ramanujan's contribution, as Bharat rightly pointed out, as translator, as poet, as a commentator. In fact, he has an excellent essay published in the Oxford Anthology of Ramanujan's writings, where he asks this question: is there anything called Indian writing in English? So this is a genre which I think, because Bharat was talking of potential research areas, non-fictional writing in English, this is by Indian writers, this is an area that I think can be looked into. And here some serious theoretical work has emerged by both practicing writers and academicians. Now, when you look at the whole idea of modernity and modernism in Indian English writing, we can see certain tropes. And some of these tropes are fascinating because of the way certain stereotypes are either coordinated in a different format, challenged, questioned, or readdressed. There's a story by Shashi Deshpande. A lot of people are familiar with it. It's in the syllabus as well. It's called Intrusion. The Intrusion. This is a story which is quite short, but in terms of the psychological dimensions that Shashi Deshpande brings to the table, she addresses not only the woman question, the whole question of freedom, the question of ideology, the apparatus of patriarchy, the taken for granted assumptions of society, but she is also using a particular kind of language that is very, very modern in terms of the sensitive handling of the subject. The language is not archaic, the language is not of the 60s or 70s, but it is a language with which the modern Indian reader can identify and relate to. So on the one hand, themes such as these have been part of the Indian writing scene in English. There was a novel published, which was, I don't know why it didn't get that much attention. It was called Yatra, the Journey. It was published, I think, in 1987, the same year as The Shadow Lines was published. Yatra, the Journey, by a British Indian writer called Nina Sibal. And this was, the novel was based on a character's life. Her name was Krishna. And how the pressures of family life, the whole silent, overwhelming demand of patriarchy compels her to leave her domestic fold and branch out. And that is the journey, branch out and move towards the world of politics and assert herself in terms that makes her feel that she is her own person. But the language of that novel was different from the language that we find in The Intrusion. So what I'm saying is, not only has the registry been changing over time, but there has also been a change in the way writers have taken up these themes, looked at issues, and considered them to be significant in terms of the times they have lived in. There's also another interesting aspect in fiction. There was a novel called Solo by Rana Dasgupta, and you find that the Bharat sir talked about alienation not being part of the modernist idea in Indian writing. I think that is, especially now in the 21st century, when you look at new writers, that is slightly changing. There is the novel of the city, poetry of the city, in fact, theater of the city. And if we look at the plays of Gurcharan Das, there is a very, very interesting blend in the plays of Gurcharan Das between morality, ideality, and reality. The challenges that face the individual living in a very, very closeted urban circumstance, and how that pressure actually goes on to exert a psychological demand on the individual. That, I think, is addressed by writers such as Gurcharan Das. If you look at some of the writings of the contemporary poets, if you look at poems by Ranjit Haskote, if you look at poems by Tabish Khair, or by Jit Thail. Jit Thail is also a very, very prolific novelist. You will find that they have tried to address the whole question of anxiety and the pressures of sociability. They have tried to address that by working out a different kind of register. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding the language that is used by these writers. They have, in a way, gone into the forbidden terrain in terms of themes. We have a lot of very, very interesting queer fiction, queer poetry. And we have to talk about the writings of Hoshang Merchant, who is a queer poet who writes about the body. Now the body as one of the important sites of literature in Indian writing is a fascinating site in terms of how different writers have sought to look at the body. In a Bengali text by Mahashita Devi called Draupadi, which is translated by Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak, we have the protagonist, Draupadi, making the body her vehicle of address, her means of subjugating her subjugation, challenging her subjugation. And what we find in Indian English poetry, the challenge of the frameworks that had inhibited the previous writers of the 60s and the 70s, that has now been looked at in terms of personal experience, in terms of interpersonal relationships, in terms of desire, in terms of angst. And certain of these themes have come to occupy not only personalized writing, but also they have entered the domain of other genres, like the field of detective fiction, thriller fiction, crime fiction, and of course the social problem novel that deals with the problems of society as a whole. I would say that modern Indian English writing has remained socially entrenched, and these variations that we refer to in for instance Azum Hassan's novel Lunatic in My Head, we find a lot of when I read that novel, I was reminded of Murakami, because there's a lot of music being talked about. Lunatic in My Head is a phrase that comes from a song by Pink Floyd. So you have a different kind of mental registry being built, being created. And that actually has shown us that modernity is a kind of what can be called a fluid moving spectacle. It is not something, to go back to Eliot, it is not something that is static, or it is not something that is fixated, but it is something that is taking the whole world as it comes and as it happens alongside the writing. And there's a time when Kamala Das's autobiography, My Story, created quite a storm. But it was a period when publishers and magazines were not very, very confident about publishing Kamala Das because of the language, the theme, her situating of the female body, and that became an issue. But those days are gone. I would like to refer to two very, very important aspects of modern Indian English writing. One is the role of the publisher. There are two very, very important publishers. I think without those publishers, those two publishers, things wouldn't have, or those two publishing houses, things wouldn't have been as smooth as they are now. One is Clearing House, which was a publishing firm which published Indian English writing in Bombay. That it was not then known as Bombay. And the other is Writers' Workshop, P. Lal's Writers' Workshop. I think we have all had, when P. Lal was alive, I had the occasion to interact with him. And in fact, in the different histories of Indian English writing, P. Lal's contribution has been rightly, deservedly celebrated. All the major Indian writers, K.K. Darwala, Nissim Ezekiel, Vikram Seth, published through Writers' Workshop. In fact, P. Lal created that environment. And if you have a Writers' Workshop edition of any of these writers, you'll marvel at the calligraphy. All the lettering was done by P. Lal himself. And he believed in Indian English writing when it was something that was challenged. I would like to draw your attention to a 1963 essay by the Bengali poet and critic Buddhadev Basu, who famously said in 1963, the essay was called Bengali Gastronomy. It was about food. And Buddhadev Basu said that there cannot be anything called Indian food, and in the same way, there cannot be anything called Indian literature. He made a point which was very valid in the sense that we have different food. We have Marathi food, we have Assamese food, we have Bengali food, we have the locations, cultures determine the way we see ourselves eating what we eat. In the same way, he said, how can there be Indian literature? You can have different language writing, such as you can have Marathi writing, Sindhi writing, Hindi literature, Urdu literature, Telugu literature, but you can have something which comes under a blanket. But that idea or that responsive mechanism to see Indian writing as separate, Indian writing as something that is alien to Indian culture, that has somehow been, now we can see that has somehow been accommodated into the Indian fabric, in the sense that Indian writers have looked at issues which are Indian. Kiran Desai, who won the Booker Prize in 2006, she in all her interviews, she proclaims that I am an Indian writer. She lives in the United States, but she says, I'm an Indian writer and write about Indian life, and this is how I see myself. So this dimension of Indian writing in English is no longer confined to the Indian shores. It's no longer something that is part of living in India and writing. Many of these writers we know are writers who stay outside of India. And the way they look at Indian writing, and many of these writers are now publishing their books from outside of India, not from within India, outside of India. And not only the mainstream publishers, even very, very independent publishers, which don't have wider presence, are actually publishing their writing. I would like to refer to a particular poet called Sujata Bhatt. Sujata Bhatt is a poet who lives in Germany. Her books are published by British publishers. She writes in English and are published by either Anvil Press or Canongate. These are specific poetry publishers. So what I'd like to draw your attention to is from Clearing House, which published Eunice D'Souza, which published the very famous Missing Person by Adil Jusawala, and Writers Workshop, which published and which still publishes many Indian English writers. Now we have Indian writers occupying the global scene through their footprint on the global literary scene by making their presence felt in different publishers' catalogs worldwide, not only here, but worldwide. So this is a significant change. It has to do with the change of industry. It has to do with the change in the nature of readership and the way reading is done. Of course, now we do a lot of reading digitally. I am also reminded of a particular comment made by the Canadian critic, Northrop Frye. Northrop Frye, in a very significant book called The Modern Century, he said that he made a point that modernism is a decision to look at things differently from the sense of continuity. The modern writer would say, okay, let's continue, let's take it forward. From that, the modern writer would try to look things differently. That is how he argued the emergence of the modern century. He also made a very interesting point, and he was saying that at the height of imperialism in England and in Europe, we have the emergence of the museum. The different navigators, colonizers, they would come and they would take different artifacts. You have the famous exhibition in England in Queen Victoria's time. So the museum for the European writer, for the English writer, created alternative worlds, created new worlds. And he said, with the coming of the museum, the whole provincial, insular outlook changed. And I think something like that we can relate to and associate with Indian writing in English. With the 21st century, with the coming of technology, the widening of readership, Indian writing in English is no longer read by Indian readers, it's read worldwide. So with the widening of the readership base, with people coming to know India differently from the way it knew India earlier, so now we have a different dimension to Indian writing in English in terms of publication, in terms of reception, in terms of readership, and also in terms of criticism. Baral sir was talking about, very interestingly, about the histories, about the anthologies that were there in terms of Indian poetry. R. Parthasarthi's anthology, 10 modern Indian poets, and Mehrotra's subsequently 12 modern Indian poets have been controversial because they have there has been a policy to their selection. It is somewhat personalized. Subsequently, Jeet Thayil produced 60 Indian poets, which was again, it was titled 60 Indian Poets, again very craftily done. And he went on to produce another anthology called the Blood Axe Anthology of Indian Poetry, which has 72 poets. What we have seen is that there are two very, very interesting histories now of Indian English writing. Those who are doing research, I think you have already gone through them. One is the, both are published by Cambridge University, and they are excellently done. I would strongly recommend you to read those two histories. One is the history of Indian poetry in English, edited by Rosika Chaudhary, and the other is the history of Indian novel in English by Alka Unjaria. Both these histories are done with a lot of research, with a lot of investigative work, and the bibliographies are excellent. So there has been a shift, just like the history of George Sampson's history of English literature was a major step in history of English literary writing. Similarly, these two books, one on poetry, the other on fiction, actually take it a step forward from Mehrotra's book, which is the Illustrated History of Indian English Writing, originally published by Permanent Black. So what I'm seeing here is that modernism or modernity has come to Indian English writing through different gates. They have come to occupy the Indian English writer, the reader, and of course the whole scene through different entry points. And that is something which is very fascinating. The whole marketplace, the nature of the writing, the reception, the criticism. And as Sanjeev was talking about Baral sir in Sod Ganga, when you look at the research work being done, you'll see that there's a lot of research work being done on Indian English writing. So this is a very, very welcome step, a good thing. At the same time, I also feel that an Indian reader, a reader who is conversant or is doing work in Indian English writing, should also try to keep track of developments in vernacular literatures. We have excellent vernacular literatures. I would say that one of the classics of modern Indian literature is Samskara. This is a book that Baral sir is closely associated with. U.R. Anantamurthy's Samskara. And we will of course encounter Salman Rushdie in Midnight Children, and we'll know India, but we also need to know Samskara through Anantamurthy in translation. So I think a very, very fascinating blend of India is now available for the Indian researcher doing work in Indian writing English. This is as I have told you, very, very interesting, and we can of course continue to say it's an emerging field, but I think this is a time when Indian English writing is beginning to find its feet as a category, and as it coexists, as it expands its frontiers, as it looks at different worldviews and takes its journey forward alongside other literatures, I'm hopeful that we'll have even more fascinating work to come. With these words, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Vibhas Chaudhary sir, for really an insightful keynote address on the topic Modernism in Indian English Literature. Sir, you have rightly mentioned that Indian writing in English is not read in India only. It is now global world literature, it is now global literature. And I'm sure, and for the academician research who are participating in the webinar, we would like to inform them that this webinar session is recorded live and will be beneficial will be given the recording to all the participants. Also, it is on live on Facebook, so that the students of English literature can also benefit by his talk. And with these words, I would like to thank once again Professor Vibhas Chaudhary sir, and I would like to once again inform the participants, the academicians and researchers, that there will be a question and answer session at the end, and there will be best question will be awarded accordingly, and also every presentation of the selected papers will be there after at the end part of the webinar. Now I'd like to request welcome Professor Devdulal Halder. Devdulal Halder sir, am I audible to you?
Yes. Good morning.
Okay. So I would like to introduce before you now the Professor Devdulal Halder. He is now teaching English in Kirori Mall College, University of Delhi. Mr. Devdulal Halder, Professor Halder sir, in fact, had his graduation in English honors from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata University. He did his MA from JNU, he did his MPhil from JNU, and also pursuing his research on research in JNU itself. Professor Devdulal Halder has 20 years of teaching experience in the University of Delhi, and also he is a visiting, he has given lectures and he teaches postgraduate English courses in many other universities as guest teachers. He has, to his credit, 8 books. He has 7 edited books. He has produced 14 study materials, many research papers, and he has many chapters in many edited books. Also, he is very well known for producing online study materials. Besides this, Professor Debdullah Haldar is also working for the school children, and to his credit, he has already published school books, 8 number of school books. His seminars, and he regularly participates in seminar workshops, both national and international, and he has supervised, he is a regular supervisor of MPhil students, and he's has a lot. His areas of research and interest include linguistics, literary theory, literature of Bengal, Indian writing, popular fiction, etc. Now I'd like to request our resource person, Professor Debdullah Halda from University of Delhi, to present his lecture, to give his address. Professor Halda, sir.
Yes. Hello. Before I begin my lecture, I would like to thank Sanjeev for organizing this. And the webinar is going on so beautifully with the insightful lecture by Professor Baral and Professor Chaudhary. After their brilliant rendition on modernity and Indian literature, I think there is not much to add as such. Professor Baral has talked about primarily focused on the 20th century and talked about the literary register of Indian English, whereas Dr. Vibhas Chaudhary has talked about 20th century, 21st century, 20th and 21st century both, and started from 1951 Nissim Ezekiel's collection of poetry onwards till 2019 Kohinoor Express. So it is about 70 years of history he has put in about 40-45 minutes, and that's more than what one can expect in a seminar or webinar lecture. So after these brilliant renditions of things in the last 2 lectures that we had, what I think I should be doing is to look back a bit and look at the origin of Indian English writers, or not Indian writers, but look at the origin of Indian English as such. Why I am doing so? Reason being because when we come to this term, whether you talk about modernity, whether you talk about Indian English, whether you talk about Indian English literature, or even Indian literature, all these are somehow contested terms. These are contested terms because all of them somehow defy any particular definition. There cannot be one definition given to any of these terms. Let us talk about modernity. When we talk about modernism, we do find out that many people like to refer to the first half of the 20th century and talk about literary modernism. Some people will say, no, we'll try to look at literary modernism from the first modern age, probably the Elizabethan age or the 16th century. Or some postmodernist theorists to try to locate modernity in the 18th century. So when you talk about modernism or modernity, to find out is to give a clear-cut definition is very difficult. But one thing which Dr. Vibhas Chaudhary talked about in Author Fire, when he talked about there is a discontinuity from the earlier and a new beginning, is something which moreover presents a kind of modern outlook. And with this particular view that there is a break from the past, a rapture from the past, is something with which I want to enter into my discussion on Indian modernity or modernism in Indian literature. And there I would try to locate modernism in the early 19th century. Now, when I say so, many people will probably disagree with this fact that when modernism wasn't even there in the 20th century Europe, how can you merely talk about modernism in 19th century India? Now, the reason being, there can be various reasons for this. There can be a broad research done on this particular thing. First of all, I would like to say, if you talk about English studies, the English studies in India is much older than it is British. We have started studying Indian English or English literature as a discipline as much earlier than the British did. because it is only in 1890s, 1900 that the British took up English as a discipline, whereas we have been studying English literature as a part of whatever we talk about colonial mentality from the early 19th century. This is the first thing. And that English education of ours obviously made us start writing in English. Because when we look at the early Indian English writers, most of them we find out are Western educated. Whether we talk about Diozio, whether we talk about Krishnamohan Banerjee, whether we talk about Michael Madhusudan, whether we talk about Toru Dutt, all of them are Western educated, and it is only probably because of their Western education or their closeness to the Western culture. Somewhere we find out that it becomes, or they start writing the thing. Now, again, when I say so that the early 19th century writers are having certain kind of modernist outlook, there may be problem, because some people may try to say that most of them are trying to imitate the Romantic poets, and so therefore there is a certain kind of westernization of their writing. And can that westernization be termed as modernism? Can merely being Western be termed as being modern? Now, when we say this becomes a very, very difficult proposition, because it is true that to some extent that they are trying to copy, or they are trying to imitate, they are trying to model their writing in terms of what the Romantic poets tried to do in 19th century England. But at the same time, to say that they are blindly imitating the West is something which is wrong. Like in this particular context, I was reading Michael Madhusudan's letters to his friends, and I came across a particular line which I found to be significant, and I should share this with you. The lines are, he says, and this is written to his friend called Gaur Das Bosak. He says, "In matters literary, old boy, I am too proud to stand before the world in borrowed clothes. I may borrow a necktie or even a waistcoat, but not the whole suit." So we do find out there is that Michael Madhusudan is talking about borrowed clothes. It's a borrowed language, but that borrowed language at that point of time was borrowed. But today it's not borrowed anymore, because we, in the process of the 200 and more years of our history of being close or being with the English culture and literature and English language, have produced English register that Professor Baral and Professor Chaudhary, both of them talked about, which is distinct in itself. And today we cannot anymore talk about it being in borrowed clothes. So even at that point of time in 19th century, even if they thought that it was borrowed clothes, we do find out they're not borrowing the whole thing. They are saying that they may borrow a necktie, a waistcoat, but not the whole suit. So we do find out literary register at that point of time, even in the 19th century, is not merely being Western, but moreover, we do find out that they may be taking certain things from the West, but they are trying to put that together, put that in Indian context, and trying to create something new out of it. This is the first thing. And in this context, second important thing which I would like to point out is Tapan Roy Chaudhary, who is a 19th century scholar, his views when he talks about westernization. To find out, he primarily looks at this westernization of Indian literature, Indian sensibilities, from the point of view of which is very different in the sense that he says that the westernization merely worked as a catalyst. Westernization merely worked as a catalyst. And again, I would like to quote Tapan Roy Chaudhary when he says, "Like a chemical process, the end result was no simple synthesis. Like a chemical process, the end result was no simple synthesis, perfect or imperfect, of two different traditions, nor an uncomplicated triumph of one culture over another. It is a new product, essentially different from both the indigenous inheritance and elements of Western civilization, which impinged on it. It is a modern sensibility and a striking end product of catalytic process." So we do find out Tapan Roy Chaudhary very clearly points this particular fact that it is, when we talk about literary modernism in the early 20th century India and Indian writing, it is primarily Westernization primarily worked as was having a catalytic effect, and it is because of the catalytic effect we find out that we come up with a very different literary sensibility. Now, in this context, the third writer that I would like to quote or I would like to talk about is Ashish Nandi. And many of you probably has come across and have read this book called The Intimate Enemy, Loss and Recovery of Self Under Colonialism. I think it's published in 1983. It is an interesting book in the sense that it is trying to look at colonialism from a very different perspective of it being Indian colonialism being that of a shared culture. And there Ashwini talks about two homologies by which or to which the Indian writers are primarily responding. The first homology is that of the Naditva and Purushvatva. Okay, now when the colonial culture came to India, we find out that when you talk about Western colonialism, they primarily trying to project themselves as a very, very masculine culture and try to see the East or India or any other colonized space as primarily very feminine. And therefore, you find out when you talk about Africa, there's notion of it being a virgin land. When you talked about Asian countries, it is talked about as the notion of veil comes in. So the femininity of the feminization of the colonized space was a very distinct thing in the Western colonial temperament. And it is against this that you find out that the early Indian English writers reacts. Like to give you an example, you find out Michael Madhusudan Dutt, when he's writing his famous epic called Meghnad Vat Kavya, you find that instead of talking about Ram and Lakshman, what he is doing is he's taking up Ravan and Meghnad and celebrating the masculinity of Ravan and Meghnad and seeing Ram as a colonizer to Lanka. And as against the colonizing of Ram of Lanka, we find out Meghnad is reacting against it with his masculinity and how he is trying to oppose the colonial culture. Now, in that particular context, what Ashish Nandi talks about, citing this example, is that Michael Madhusudan Dutt is trying to go back to the Indian notion of masculinity in terms of the Kshatriyahood. And that Kshatriyahood, which was dormant at that point of time in Indian writing, certainly became a celebrated thing in the literary imagination, literary sensibilities of 19th century India, primarily in writings of that of Michael Madhusudan Dutt. Now, this is one way of reacting, where you find out that you say, if the West is masculine, then I am also masculine enough and we will fight in equal terms. This is one way of doing it. Second way of doing it is probably when we look at a figure like Gandhi. And obviously, we all know how important he is in terms of his influence on the early 20th century Indian writers. But when you look at Gandhi, to find out what Ashish Nandi has to talk about there is that that Gandhi didn't believe in this particular thing about that femininity or masculinity is something one is greater than the other. What he talked about primarily was when one can go over this, get over this notion of being masculine or being feminine, and to think in terms of one being much more human. So celebrating the humanistic element is also one of the important things that is being there in the Indian writing. And I'm not specifically talking about Indian English writing, but Indian writing, whether you talk about Rabindranath Tagore, whether you talk about the other writers, those who are trying to celebrate in the early 20th century. This is one particular homology to find out which Ashish Nandi talks about. One is, therefore, again, I'm repeating, one is masculinity and femininity and how the early Indian English writers reacted to it. And second is to find out people like Gandhi who try to bypass this notion that masculinity is better than femininity and therefore try to celebrate a certain kind of humanistic attitude, a humanitarian aspect over femininity and masculinity. This is the first homology. The second homology that Ashish Nandi talks about is that of childhood. When the colonizing the colonialists try to look at this notion of child, they primarily look at a child as an inferior version of an adult who needs to be educated and civilized. So when they come to the Eastern countries, or when they come to the Orient, to find out, they primarily try to look at the East as childlike, where they are merely inferior versions of the adult, those who needs to be civilized and cultured. So we do find that Africa has been talked about having no culture of their own, or India has been talked about a land which has lost its ancient golden culture and needs to be educated once more about, or needs to revive that ancient golden culture. Now, in that particular context, you find out that this child as an inferior version is being talked about by the colonial parameters. And then Gandhi again reacts to this by saying that if you say that we are child, then we are not child because we are inferior version of the adult, but we are child because we are being innocent. And Ashish points out again that it is his perfect innocence of Gandhi, which becomes his way of fighting against the martial masculine West. So Nandi gives the example of Dandi March when he starts the journey to go and pick up a pinch of salt. And when he starts his journey, to find out that he is showing his perfect weakness against the colonial parameters, colonial martial terms. And by the time he goes and picks up the salt, to find that the whole of the India is behind him. So it is his perfect weakness which the martial masculine West is not able to deal with. So when we talk about Indian sensibility or Indian modernism, we do find out that we are in some ways, because of our colonial experience, trying to react to the West. But in this reaction to the West, we are not in any way imitating the West. What we are doing is that we are, or what I talked about earlier, we are being influenced by the West, but the West is primarily working as a catalyst to our exploration of our own selves. This is the third point that I want to emphasize. The fourth point that I want to emphasize is the notion of nation, because when we talk about nation today, talking about nation is a very dangerous thing for various reasons. Now, did we have a nation prior to the arrival of West, prior to the arrival of the British? Because when I was reading Sudipta Kobiraj, and Sudipta Kobiraj is saying that before the arrival of the British, what we had were kingdom or kingdoms, and these kingdoms were primarily fighting against each other, and we had no notion of a coherent nation. It is only when the West comes up and we are getting acquainted with the Western ideas, with the Western ideology, that the notion of nation comes to us. And we start trying to develop a sense of our notion. And English education, the English language, has a very significant role to play in this formation of a nation. Now, in this particular context, what is significant is that when we talk about this notion of nation, to find out Tagore has a very significant thing to say in his lecture. There are 3 lectures on nationalism. In one of the lectures is nationalism in India, where he says, form yourself as a nation to stop the encroachment of the nation. And the last nation, N is in caps. Form yourself into a nation to stop the encroachment of the nation, second nation, N in caps. The second nation refers to the West. So if we have to stop the encroachment of the Western nation, then we need to develop ourselves as a nation. So second thing that he mentions there is that when we are trying to come up with this, our notion of nation, we are not trying to come up with it in the mechanical industrial sense in which the British came up as a nation. We moreover came up a nation, according to Tagore, because there is, and I quote Tagore, magical exploration of man's living fingers. So there is something magical about Indian nation which made us come together as a nation. Now, when you look at Indian English, we find out Indian English writing, and when you talk about earliest Indian English writings, we find out that starting from DOE onwards, this notion of nation is being celebrated. So from that point of view, when you try to look at Indian writing, before even Indian nation came into our thought process, we find out Indian writing is already talking about it. Like if we talk about the poem by DOE called The Harp of the Nation, Half of India, we find out the notion of nation is being talked about there. When you talked about the notion of a poem like freedom to the slave, you find the notion of freedom is being talked about there. So when we talk about DeRosio as one of the, often people talk about him as the father of Indian English poetry. He is the one who has started this notion, and he is changing the whole of the terminology of Indian English and writing. Obviously, there is the question of register coming in, but which probably my earlier speakers have dealt with. But I'm talking about from the point of the thematic thing, to find that whole of the expression of Indian writing changes with this catalytic contact with the West. And because of this, we do find out the notion of freedom, notion of India, notion of the Indian nation becomes much more significant in Indian writing. And also along with this, what comes up very significantly is that how we are trying to build this nation. Then the formation of the nation becomes a significant thing, and we find out that most of the Indian writing in the 19th century and also in the early 20th century talked in terms of nation and nation building, and how do we construct our nation. Similarly, we find out when you come to a poet like Toru Dutt, often people talk about Toru Dutt being completely westernized, living in England, living in France, and from their writing primarily for an English and French audience. And but when I look at Toru Dutt, what I find out is that Toru Dutt is, even though she is being influenced by the West, even though she is being influenced by the Romantic poets, we'll find out when she is writing a book like the ancient collection of poems like Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, she is taking up the ballads, she is taking up the mythology, Indian mythology, in trying to remold it, repackage it, and trying to present it to the Indian readers primarily, and trying to do so to see India from a very, very modern perspective. Like, to give another example of the poem Our Casuarina Tree. In that particular poem, you find out she is trying to look at a tree. Now, many people will talk about it, that there is a Wordsworthian influence in this. But if you try to overlook this Wordsworthian influence, what you figure out is that she is celebrating the Casuarina tree not because she wants to be close to nature, but she is looking back to it in terms of how she enjoyed herself during her childhood in that under that particular tree. And in that presentation of the tree, in the celebration of the tree, we do find out that she is at the same time trying to bring in a modern sensibility into Indian writing. So when you talk about these earlier Indian English writers, when you talk about DeRosio, or they talk about Michael Madhusudan Dutt, though Michael Madhusudan Dutt primarily is, most of the writings are in Bangla, or you talk about Toru Dutt, you find out that the earliest Indian English writers, they primarily try to represent India in such an aspect which is a break from the earlier traditions of Indian writing. In that sense, Indian English, as it comes into existence, comes up with a very, very different sensibility, and that sensibility is something which till now is in continuity. Now, in this particular context, you find out there is one particular phrase which becomes very significant, which is used by both Ananthamurthy and also recent scholar from JNU, Makran Paranjpe. The phrase is selective assimilation. And going back to what Michael Madhusudan Dutt says, that I may be using a borrowed language, but I am not borrowed the whole suit. So when we are borrowing something, when borrowing is nothing bad. We have all cultures borrow from one another, all language, all registers borrow from one another. And when we borrow, we are not borrowing the whole thing, we are not just merely imitating, but we are selecting what is beneficial for us, and we are only borrowing that aspect. And this assimilationist tendency of Indian sensibility is always there, which Probably in the language of Homi Baba will be hybridity. In the language of simple Indian language will be that of assimilationist tendencies, of selective assimilation. And when it's selectively assimilated, we have from there tried to move on, and we have come today to what is being talked about by my earlier two speakers. Whether you talk about Nissim Ezekiel's poetry, it starts from 1951 to Lencil de Silva's book of Kohinoor Express, which is trying to build up a new literary legacy. So we to find out from the 1827, when the Harp of India was published by Dirozier, till 1919, Kohinoor Express, there is a long, long journey that Indian English writing has come up with. And in this journey, one of the important things, I think, and from my perspective, which is the most important thing, there is this culturally assimilative tendency, which is the most important thing from the thematic point of view, apart from the literary register, apart from the role of the publishers, apart from the conscious attempt to create a modernistic attitude, and if at all there is a postmodernist attitude, that is being there in this kind of writing. With this, I would like to stop here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Debdullah Halda, sir. Thank you for your resourceful address on modernism in Indian English literature. I'm sure all the academicians and researchers, and also the students community, will be benefited by your valuable, in fact, resourceful address. Thank you so much, Professor Debdullah Halda, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir.
Now, I would like to request Dr. Birender Pal for a brief presentation on online resources in Indian English literature. Dr. Birender Pal is a librarian of Kaliabar College, Assam, and also he has expertise in IFLIDNet and university libraries. He's also having expertise in maintaining the automated and digital library system. I'm sure all the academician researchers will be benefited by the brief presentation of Dr. Birender Pal. Thank you. Over to Birender Pal, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving me a nice introduction and assigning me a very difficult task. Because talking with library science people is not a big challenge, but when we talk about the different disciplines, it's a really big challenge. And talking with the English background discipline, it's a really honor for me also that I've been a part of this program, and it's a great honor. And I would like to thank to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Goswami, sir, for this opportunity. And I would like directly to share my screen. I am Dr. Birender Pal. And dear participants, I am quite sure you might be aware whatever resources which we are going to show now. These are the just gist of the information. Some of the online resources we will try to show you in the field of English literature. And these are the only the point of view of resources. This will be covered. Just give me a second. Dr. Sanjeev, is my screen is visible?
Yeah, right now visible.
Yeah, thank you. It's Google now?
Google, yeah.
Yeah. So dear participants, I will show some of the live demo. You know about Swayam. This is one of the most important platform that is called MOOCs, MOOCs, where you will get not only provision of e-learning, you will also get the provision of certification. So what is Swayam? I'm not going into detail because I have very less time, 10 minutes. I will try to show you as much as possible. And see, I will show only the resources part here. And see, there is again some ICT initiatives of MHRD. You can go and you can consult this ICT initiatives of MHRD. There are lots of ICT initiatives of MHRD. You can go and access each one of it, like Swayam provides there, National Digital Library, EPG Parsala, Sudganga, eSoth Sindhu. So in this way, different ICT initiatives are here. You can go and access it. Now, I will show you the most important part. That is the learning resources during this COVID-19 situation in the Swayam platform in the field of English literature. Let's COVID-19 not stop your learning, continue with Swayam. You go to this option, and if you are from non-engineering background, you go to this option, you will get two options. One is called postgraduate discipline, and another will get the another option called the undergraduate discipline. In the postgraduate discipline, yeah, there are lots of courses. Now my intention is just to figure out the English language or English subject. So you can see some of the resources like this arts, language and teaching. Then some of the resources in the PG level also you will find it like, so just a second, it's not coming. Yeah, now it's coming. So here you will get access to different learning materials available on your topic. You can go and access this information from the SWAYAM portal on the English language. Here, see arts, English teaching and learning. Then here other subjects are also here. Criticism, English criticism is there. You can go and you can enjoy this criticism parts also. Critical study, then criticism, literary criticism is there. You can go and access to these informations. And I'm not the expert of English language, just literature. See, this is the self-learning. You can play the video directly from here, from this portal. So this was all about the learning materials which are available under this portal. I will show you another example that is called EPG Pathshala, which is also very important. You can go and access it. Under EPG Pathshala, you will get lots of learning materials on English literatures. Here you just go and find literature. Here under English 560 learning materials are available. You just click any one of it and you select your module. Suppose you need some information on English literature up to 1590, then you select it. Then suppose introduction to age or Anglo-Saxon elegies. You see, you will get first e-text. E-text means the simple PDF file. You can use it prepared by the expert and you can download it into your computer hard disk or your mobile phone. Similarly, there is self-learning material. That is again the video file. You can play it for your learning purpose. So in this way, you can go and access different learning material available on the English literature on this EPG Pathshala. Here you cannot do any courses. You can just enjoy the learning materials here. You see here English literature 1519 to 1798 is there. 19th century English literature is there. 10th century English literature, American literature. All these informations are available. And this bracket, within bracket, this numbers indicates that 35 numbers of learning materials is already uploaded on this particular topic. Here you will get PDF file, that is the textual material, and the video file. You can learn by yourself, which is one of the most important objectives of e-learning. So I have talked about SWAYAM, I have talked about EPG Pathshala. Then I will show you the most important part, that is called National Digital Library of India, which we call in short NDLI. And NDLI is one of the important platform where you will get lots of learning materials on English literature. Specialized, the literature has been categorized here in this English literature. You can customize your interface into SMS or other languages also. You should sign in with your login account. If you don't have login account, you just create your login account with a new user ID and password. Instantly, you can create it by your own. And I will directly go to see these are the different subjects. And if you're from literature background, you just go to this area. Suppose study of English literature. If you want to know more about this, you will get video lectures on English literatures, history of English literatures. If you want to know, you just go and visit the video lectures, 20th century world English literatures. You can go and access the video materials which are available under this topic, like on 20th century fictions or 20th century poetry. These videos are available. You can play, lots of videos are available on this National Digital Library of India platform.
Today's topic is 20th century fiction, as announced by.
So my intention is just to make you aware about these facilities which are right now available under NDLI. Similarly, lots of other subjects on English literatures are there. You can go and access this like Greek tragedy, Indian writing in English, British poetry, drama, then American literature. All these learning materials are already available under the NDLI platforms. So this was all about the learning materials on the literature subjects. Again, you can also consult one in the website that is called Swayamprabha. Swayamprabha is a group of 32 DTH channels where you can enjoy the different learning materials by watching television set at your home. If you are having Dish TV at your home, or if you are having DD Disc at your home, then you can watch these learning materials at your home under your television set. Right now, these Swayamprabha channels are not available under Dish TV or DD Disc, sorry, Airtel TV and Tata Sky, but in Dish TV, these channels are already available. So if you are from humanities, language and literature, then for you, channel number 1 is there. You can go and access this channel number 1, and here you will get the different informations on the subjects of English literatures. If you are from BA honors in English or different learning materials on the literature subject, you can go and access from this here. And this is the portal of Swayamprabha. This is not the portal where we have to see everything. The real thing or real taste of the Swayamprabha you will find in the television. You just go and watch the televisions, and the same program, if you somehow forget on the same day, you can watch the same program on some other time on the same particular day. There is no any limitation that you have to watch that program on the particular time. There are other time also, 5 or 4 times these programs are telecasted throughout the day. So this was again the learning great materials. You can go and access this materials. And if you are from colleges, I'll show you one N-list, which is very important because every colleges of India are now part of this N-list facility. And for this, you have to take the N-list membership from your college libraries. Your librarian will help you in this regard. And directly when you get your member login, you go to this option, member login option. Once you log in with your account, then just you enter with your username and password. And then now your intention is only to show you the English literature subjects. So suppose there is a call number option. You can also search by English literature, suppose. What are the documents that are available on English literature? In this way, I'm not the expert on English subject, just I'm showing a gist because there are different keywords you can search according to your requirements. And I'm showing only a part of it. See, lots of learning materials are here. Suppose you want to download this learning materials, you can go and you can download directly from here. Click to view. Then you will get 3 options. You can download the entire book. Then you can also read the book online, and you can also download the PDF wise chapter of this particular book. In this way, one another simple process I will show you how to search learning materials available on the N-list platform is the call number. Call number, generally you are aware about this. In your library, you are using this DDC number or call number. There is a number in your book, like for 821 in English, we are using 821 for the different literatures documents. Then there is 823 is there. 823 is for fiction in English. Similarly, 822 is drama. So in this way, you can search different informations in this way also, and you can directly download this particular book. Again, there is some critical studies also. If you want to find some critical studies, you can go and you can search in this way. So this was all about the different learning materials. And beyond this, there are lots of learning materials which are available on the open access platform. I will try to show you one of the open access platform that is called DOAJ. DOAJ is called Directory of Open Access Journals, where you will get lots of open access journals available on the literature subjects. Just you browse the subjects, and under this browse, you will find the literature area, and you can access this learning materials from this language and literature part. And you can find this 59265 numbers of journals are available on this language and literature part. And you can go by subject wise. Like you want the literature part, then you go to this general aspect. You'll get all the literature journals, all the open access journals available in the literature here in the single platforms. Moreover, there are some other websites like Project Gutenberg is also very important. You can find different ebooks, or you can download the different ebooks on Project Gutenberg. Again, there is another website called World eBook Library. You can also go to this website's World eBook Library. And last but not the least, I request everyone to download this application that is called RQS applications during this COVID-19 situation. It is very important to be safe, and this application will definitely help us to instruct to what to do or what not to do in and around us. So with this, I'd like to end my presentation. I'd like to directly go to Dr. Sanjeev Goswami, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pal, for really a wonderful session on online resources of Indian English literature. I am sure the participants and academicians and researchers who have viewed your demonstration will be really benefited. Thank you, Dr. Pal, for your presentation. Now, I'd like to request Dr. Pal to kindly unmute Mary Burwa, Associate Professor, Cotton University, Nagakala and Gopala Krishna, Imam Abdul Rahman bin Faisal University, Saudi Arabia, Dr. Susil Kumar Misra, sir, Associate Professor Head, English, SRM University, Delhi, Saba Anis and Diba Bura Baido. Actually, they have been selected. There will be 4 brief presentation of papers selected by the resource person. And first, if available, can I give access to Nagakala and Gopala Krishna, sir?
Nagakala, I have not seen. Sir, is there or not?
Kalul San, Nagakala.
I have not seen his name here.
Okay. Kalul San
is also not there.
Kalul San, in fact. If it is not there, I would like to request Dr. Susil Kumar Misra, sir.
Yeah, Susil Kumar Misra, sir. Please unmute yourself. Dr. Susil Kumar Misra, sir, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear us, sir?
Dr. Susil Kumar Misra,
sir, can you hear us?
Please unmute yourself. In the left side, there is a button, unmute button of your Zoom application. Okay, yes, now you are audible, sir. Yes.
Hello.
Yes,
hello,
sir.
We can hear you.
Yes, sir. Very.
On modernism in India.
Very good afternoon, sir. Very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Please carry on.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Sir, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank you so much for organizing a very inspiring and motivational seminar, sir, webinar, sir. And you have given opportunity to lots of listeners, lots of students who are benefited by this webinar, sir. First, I would like to discuss about the modernism. Modernism is completely change of the old orders, because all the Indian writers, they were fed up with monotonous and outdated writings or literature of romanticism, earlier medieval periods. So they also needed a change. So this modernism also started after the arrival of modernism in English literature. Indian English literature started after the arrival of British in India. The arrival of British, they also gave birth to the development of Indian English literature. So first of all, I would also like to discuss about the important writers of Indian English literature. Are you listening, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would like to discuss about the Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore, he has been regarded as the icon of Indian English literature, and he was the first Indian who was awarded Nobel Prize in 1913. And this for Gitanjali. Gitanjali is a collection of 103 poems. And every line of Gitanjali is full of inspiration, full of thought, full of motivation, full of knowledge, and full of wisdom. I would like to also recite some lines of Gitanjali in which Rabindranath Tagore also presents his dream for future India, where mind is without fear, where head is held high, where knowledge is free, where world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic wall, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches his arm towards perfection. So let my country awake. He also prayed to God to give awakening to his country, to give new awareness to his country people. So through this poem, Rabindranath Tagore also presents his dream for future India. And every line of this poem, Gitanjali, is source of knowledge and source of inspiration, and it is very beneficial to all the Indian peoples. Now, Rabindranath Tagore also, through his drama, Rabindranath Tagore has also written more than 60 plays. In his Chandalika is also one of the most important play of Rabindranath Tagore. In Chandalika, Rabindranath Tagore has also given a very sociological picture. How the people, people of lower class, they are differentiated, they are hated, they are not given proper place in our society. So in this play Chandalika, Rabindranath Tagore presents the social discrimination, social how the people of lower caste, they are not given proper position, they are not given proper care by the people of upper caste. So he has given a real picture of society. He has given a very clear picture of society. So through this place, just as Mulkraj Anand, Untouchable. Untouchable also is a sociological novel. In this, Mulkraj Anand also presents the sociological picture and in how the people of lower caste, they are not given proper position. They are hated by the people of upper caste. Similarly, this Untouchable is also similar to Chandalika. Both play are more or less, it is a novel. Chandalika, Untouchable is a novel, but Chandalika is a play. But the theme of both the novel and the play is similar, because Mulkraj Anand also presents the social discrimination through his Untouchable. Similarly, Rabindranath Tagore also presents the social picture through his Chandalika. So Rabindranath Tagore has written more than 60 plays. He has written more than 84 short stories. He has written lots of work. And his every work is source of, I am also too much inspired. I also started writing my poems after going through the poems of Rabindranath Tagore. So Rabindranath Tagore, every line of his Gitanjali is source of inspiration, source of motivation, source of knowledge, source of wisdom, source of beauty, source of knowledge. Next,
Okay.
after this, again, I would like to also discuss some Indian poets. They have also given too much.
Sir.
They have also given too much reflection to our
Dr.
Indian
Mishra,
culture.
sir. Dr. Mishra, sir.
Yes, sir.
If you have positive time, please conclude.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
have your papers in printed form, both
When you
online.
come to Nissim, thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Please conclude.
Nissim Ezekiel, in his Night of the Scorpion, he has glorified the mother. How the mother is symbol of dedication, symbol of sacrifice. Nissim Ezekiel has presented through his poem Night of the Scorpion. I remember the night my mother was stung by a scorpion. 10 hours of steady rain had driven him to crawl beneath the sack of rice. And last line, he says, thank to God for picking me and explaining my children. So ultimately, Nissim Ezekiel, thank God. Thank God. Nissim Ezekiel also presents.
Dr. Mishra, sir, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, I would like to inform all the academic researchers that that was Dr. Sushil Kumar Mishra, sir. His paper was awarded, will be awarded for one of the best papers. He is actually the head of the Department of English, SRM University, New Delhi. Now I would like to request Brenda Paul sir to unmute Diba Bura Baido for her presentation. Dr. Paul, please unmute Diba Bura Baido. Diba Bura Baido, please unmute yourself. Dr. Paul? Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes. Ma'am, you are audible. So here is Associate Professor at Department of English, Lalit Chandra Maligaon. Her paper was on modernism in Indian English poetry, the trope of homeland in Robin S. Nagman's poetry. Over to Diba Bura Baido, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. The lectures were very, informative and enlightening. And I would like to start my paper, but I won't read the entire paper. I'll skip some paragraphs. I'll just, read the relevant portions. Okay. So the beginning, the introductory paragraph, I'll skip. It is on modernism in Indian poetry. So I'll come straight to modernism in Northeastern poetry. Now, modernism in Northeastern poetry has a quintessential topical flavor. Despite being alienated from mainstream Indian English poetry in the initial period, there is a distinct growing trend of unreserved appreciation and recognition. Written in English and the native languages, the poetry of the region is imbued with a rootedness and share a common ground in chronicling their subjective realities and the predicament of their people. Now, Robin S. Nangom's poetry is modern in orientation and anchored in a deeply internalized politics. Heterogeneous imagery runs seamlessly in the fabric of his poetry that is essentially political and social critique. Memories of his homeland unequivocally infuses his thoughts and emotions. His poetry seeks to weave his personal experiences into a broader historical framework, embracing the general human situation. Now, to understand, Robin S. Nangom's poetry, it is important to be familiar with the geopolitical history of Manipur. So that part, I'll skip. And I'll just move on straight to his poetry. The issue of ethnic identity has bred innumerable ethnic groups, ultimately resulting in in-house feuding among the factions. The common intention of all the militant outfits is the same, that is, to achieve through the language of violence and not the language of dialogue. Further, each group is bent on foregrounding their respective history at the expense of dehistoricizing the past. But in the poem, The Strange Affair of Robin S. Nangom, he dismisses such efforts as, I quote, make-believe history with malicious intent, which is short-lived.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay.
I'd like to inform all the academics and researchers that her paper will be published by us in a book form, and all the abstracts that we have got 75 abstracts, and we will be giving mail to them, and we'll be very soon we'll proceed to publish a book on the matter. Thank you, Diva Pura ma'am. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to request Sabah Anis to unmute herself. Sabah Anis from Department of English, JB College, Jorhat.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm audible.
Yes, audible.
Okay. Okay. It has been a very lively session, very informative one also. Well, my proposed paper is to deal with two short stories, and some of the issues that I have taken up have already been echoed by Bibha Chaudhary Sinha. But anyway, my title reads like Deconstructing and Deculturalizing Indian Ethos, a critical reading of Shashi Deshpande's The Intrusion and Rohinton Mistray's Swimming Lessons. Now, as pointed out by Bhasher, yes, modernism in the backdrop of Indian English literature remains a very fluid concept. And if we take into consideration the emerging socio-psychological political construct of India being a very, very young nation, I should say, post independence, the very process of reading modernity in the contemporary Indian English literature, which is a vast gamut, remains a very challenging task. So in that context, I take up two short stories, as already mentioned in the title, and take up how deconstruction and deculturalization and demystification has been applied to some of the very old, accepted aura, social aura that have been associated, for example, with the institution of marriage and the culture of honeymooning in marriage. And in the second story, swimming lesson of the all the aura that we gain, the gland that we associate with going abroad for better prospect, better lifestyle, and then the suffering. Both the stories are modern in the sense that they deal with a psychological journey of the protagonist and suffering of the protagonist in isolation. Yet there are elements of modernity in them. Now, the intrusion while dismantling this whole aura of the concept of honeymoon, it also looks into vis-a-vis a woman's relationship with a man, a newly married woman, and deconstructs the whole concept of the body of a woman. And very interestingly, how far the woman has no control over her body when it comes to a man-woman relationship. And another important, because sir also, Bhivashar talked about, the language. Yes, language is very important, because when we go through the semiotic and linguistic aspect of the story, you find that right from the very beginning till the end, you don't find the protagonist being named. It's only like the pronouns I, you, he, she, we, which is very interesting. And then you also find that the whole concept, as I told you, marriage, honeymoon, and then if this very concept like married women can also be raped, the concept of marital rape, which to quote Bernard Shaw, quote unquote, legalized prostitution. So that aspect will also be looked into my paper. And coming down to the second story, Swimming Lessons by Rohinton Mistry. Here again, you find the whole demystification of this, of a person going abroad for greater life prospect, and then looking back, he is a native from Mumbai, looking back, and the whole monopoly of the spatio-temporal concept, because we find that there is a parallel shift psychologically between the past and the present, and also geographically there is a parallel shift going on between Canada, the person where he has migrated to, and the sense of alienation, and then the sense of coming back to Mumbai. So that is very interesting. So both the stories and my paper will be looking into these areas of deconstructing, deculturalizing, and demystification of Indian social cultural ethos. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sabah Anis, for giving your views on deconstruction and deculturalizing the Indian ethos. Thank you so much. Esteemed academicians and researchers, we have also, though it was a national web, now we have received papers from many foreign countries, and one says, but Indian people belonging to different, staying in different countries. Nagakala and Gopala Krishna, can you hear me? I'd like to request to unmute Palul San, right of Nagakala and Gopala Krishna. Dr. Paul? He is actually in the list now, but I cannot recognize him. Please unmute yourself. He is from Imam Abdul Rahman bin Faisal University, Saudi Arabia. I think we are not getting his connection. Now we'll go back to the main important final, in fact, session, that is question and answer session. And now I'd like to request Professor Baralsa, Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir, and Debdullah Halda sir to be active. Mary Burwa, can you hear us? I would like to request Brenda Paulsa to unmute Mary Burwa as well for comments. Now the first question, Dr. Brenda Paul, can you hear us? Okay. So the first question was what? From Tapas Kumar Varali. Why can't a modern poet express emotion in archaic meter? This question was to Professor Debdullah Halda. Debdullah Halda, please unmute yourself. And another question was from P. Lakshmi Nair. The question is on vernacular modernity and how Indian literature was addressing poverty. Professor Bibas Chaudhary sir, can you hear me? I think we have lost connection with Bibas Chaudhary sir.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Sir, okay, sir. So there are some questions for you as well. What is the value of translated works of various regional literature to English from regional language, can they be considered Indian writing in English? There's a question from Gokul Kumar Das.
Yeah, the translation, when we look at translation, of course, there are two languages involved. One is the original and the other is the language to which it is translated. And if the language to which it has been translated is English, then obviously in terms of impact, it will have some bearing on how the reader receives it, because the reader who receives an English book, originally written in English and in translation, will be able to evaluate both the texts because they're the same language, but also the sense that it is in a different language that will remain. So since we're looking at Indian writing in English specifically, I think translation will contribute to the understanding of the whole idea of India and in the Indian experience. But I don't think it can be placed within Indian writing in English.
Okay.
From if it is from a different language.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Vibhas Sudrisa. Pankaj Kumar. There's a question to Boral sir. Can ethnicity be sole basis for not being part of Indian writing? And another question from Dr. Sahar Uddin. What is the possibility of local culture of Indian regions of becoming themes of modern Indian English literature? Bibasuri sir may kindly reply.
Yeah, so you see the question of local, it depends on what the place from where one is talking to. Indian literature in English has been addressing local issues. Kamla Das, in her poetry, for instance, Hot Noon in Malabar, talks about issues that pertain to her location, such as, and again, Arun Kolatkar in Jejuri talked about Bombay. Then there is Eunice D'Souza, there's Nissim Ezekiel. So local issues, local in terms of locational issues, have occupied the Indian English writer's imagination. Sometimes, however, in the configuration of these issues, there are other factors involved. As in Midnight Children, we find there is a blend of cosmopolitan outlook. And in fact, Timothy Brennan, in an interesting essay, coined this phrase called third world cosmopolitanism. So in the sense that the experience is not confined to the local alone, but extends to accommodate issues outside that world. Local in the sense of being localized. One seminal example would be the configuration of Malgudi by R.K. Narayan. So I think this has been one of the highlights of Indian English writing, in the sense that issues which are situated in a particular location or locality have occupied the Indian English writer's imagination.
Okay, thank you, Sudrisa. I have a question, Sikha Sudhuri. I have a question for Bibhas Sudrisa. Indian English literature calls for more readership and recognition in the global scenario. What is your take on the above statement?
Obviously, since it is published in English and it is published by mainstream publishers, which have a wider market, global market, reception has been pretty good, and it has been more as we have seen in the 21st century. A qualitative understanding of this reception, of course, will have to take in a lot of other parameters. We can, if we look at some of these awards that are given, such as the Costa Award, Dylan Prize Award, which are not given from within India, but outside India, the Booker Prize, then there is the DSC South Asian Literature Prize. Many Indian writers have got these awards. There's a writer from Sikkim. Those of you who are interested in Northeast writing, Sikkim is looked into as belong to Northeast. There's a writer called Prajwal Parajulai. He has been awarded Dylan Prize. So there are writers who are writing in English and who are Indian and who have received worldwide attention and recognition. Indian writing in English, whether that is at par with other national literatures, is something that only time will tell and is a matter of evolved response. So I don't think we can actually say this is good or this is bad or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Professor Durisa. Now, the last question we'll take is from Dr. Nidhi Gupta. She has observed that an attempt of Indian writers in English, she has an observation that there is an attempt by Indian writers of Indian English writer to criticize India in their works. What is your view, Professor Devdullah Halder? I think Devdullah Halder's voice is not audible, though he's answering. Can you hear me, Halder? He's okay. We are not hearing Devdullah Halder, sir, for technical reasons. Can you hear me, Halder, sir? Your audio.
Hello.
Yeah. Please carry on.
Yeah. The thing is that when we talking about writing always is being critical. We obviously need to have a critical attitude, look at everything. It's not that only writers are critical, we readers too are critical at things, critical at looking at things. So the point that we're talking about that any writer, when he is looking at things, he obviously needs to be critical. Now, when you talk about Gramsci talks about there are two kinds of intellectuals. One is the traditional intellectual, one is the organic intellectual. Most of the writers that we have in Indian writers, they are more of organic intellectuals, those who are looking at the dominant parameters that are in the society and are very, very critical about them. So it is not just representation of the dominant ideology which is significant. What is more significant is that the dominant ideology is being questioned. The dominant ideology is being looked from a critical point of view. And also, along with one of the questions that I was looking at here is was on the issues of poverty, the issues of oppression. And to find out these kind of issues are being part of the Indian writing, very much like if you talk about diasporic writing, if you talk about writers like Jhumpa Lahiri and others, they are primarily taking up the issue of women and trying to represent the women's issue in diasporic context. If you talk about Dalit writing, they are talking about the Dalit experience in the Indian context. Now obviously, the issue of oppression is coming in. So you find out that when we are talking about Indian writing is not a monolithic category. It is very diverse, and it is at the same time very, very critical about things. So we cannot merely, that the thing that I started with in my lecture is that we cannot have a strict monolithic definition of Indian writing or modernity in Indian writing. It has to be open-ended, and it is this open-ended critical nature of Indian writing which makes it so challenging and at the same time so interesting. So you find out there's so many researches across India happening, not only across India, but across the world, happening on Indian writing in English or Indian writing in general. The reason being that it is so intense, it is so critical, it is dealing with many, many issues which are prevalent in India, not only today, but which is prevalent in India across generations for centuries. So all these are being brought into the Indian writing, into the Indian sensibility, and that is something which makes Indian writing so interesting. So from that point of view, to find out being critical, I think is the most significant aspect, not only of Indian writing, but for any writing at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Halder, sir. Thank you so much. And now we'd like to have with us our joint coordinator, Dr. Guru Joshi. Can you unmute him, Professor Pal, for concluding remarks? Dr. Guru Joshi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Professor Dr. Guru Joshi is a member of the Board of Studies in English, University of Mumbai. Over to Joshi, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. In fact, it was a fantastic going through, and what began with the inauguration presentation by Professor KC Baral, and followed by the keynote address, and then the address by the resource person, and then followed by beautiful paper presentations. In fact, this has been a very fantastic going through. First of all, I would like to just go through what Professor Baral sir said. In fact, the manner in which he went through the whole issue, and then he just questioned whether modernity is a borrowed idea, and then he also looked at the historical perspective, and then he looked at the idea of like how the Western idea of modernity, modernism, and how the Indian idea of modernism looks at the issue. And then further on, he also looked at the present books published by Oxford University Press, then the articles and the books written by V.K. Gokak. And then he looked at this particular important issue of changing register in Indian writing in English, and which he feels that many people have not taken up to this particular issue. Further on, I was really impressed by this particular presentation by Professor Chaudhary, wherein he began with this the two articles that were published in 1968, one by Adil Jusawala, then C.D. Narasimhaiah. And then further on, he also mentioned this particular article published by K. Sachidanandan. Then further on, the articles published in 2015 and 2016 by Anjum Hassan. Further on, he also looked at this particular essay article written by on A.K. Ramanujan's essay. And further on, if I counted, he made a mention to 8 different articles. Very, very beautiful presentation. And what happens was, whatever the issues which Professor Baral began with, Professor Chaudhary took us right through the ideas and the development of this so-called issues of concerning modernism in Indian English literature. And the beautiful part was that, further to that, I would like to add to Professor ideas expressed by Professor Haldar sir. And actually, the idea that he brought out was somewhere starting with from 19th century India, and how it further developed. And his point of focus was Ashish Nandi's The Intimate Enemy. And then he looked at the development of modernism as it went through in the Indian context. Then in all this, okay, after that we had this presentation by Dr. Virendra Pal on the ICT initiatives which we as a teacher can undertake. And he talked about different issues. Most of the teachers may be into it, but to those who are not much into it, can really delve deeper and further gain much benefit from this. But I would like to say one thing, Goswami sir, and to all the participants, that whatever began on a clear and a soft note, as presented by the inaugural speaker, Professor Baral, I would like to surely say that the ideas have been built up in such a beautiful vertical as well as in the horizontal manner. And the beauty of the seminar, for that matter, now in this context, we have what is called as a webinar. The beauty of the webinar will lie in this, that how we take home the points and how we delve deeper into it, and how we make use of all these issues. Okay, I should mention the 4 paper presenters. For that, first one was Dr. Sushil Kumar Mishra, then it was Professor Diba Barua, and third one, I believe it was Professor Saba Anish, which was quite analytical, and the words like demystification, deculturalization approach, which she brought out with a very beautiful language. And another two which we were trying to contact, I think one was from Saudi Arabia. We couldn't get them through. Actually, the national seminar itself becomes international now, and we have attained new heights. And the beauty of this will lie as to how much ideas we take home and we think on it, and further on generate beautiful papers which we would be publishing in near future. I think I should stop here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you so much, Dr. Guru Joshi. In fact, he was our joint coordinator, and we thank him so much. Dr. Guru Joshi, thank you so much. Now we'd like to have with us the webinar host, PK Deka and DK Bezbura, Deven Kumar Bezbura, Principal, Kamrup College, and General Secretary PK Deka, sir. DK Bezbura, sir. Unmute yourself.
I am here. Hello.
Oh, hello, sir. Give us our concluding remarks.
Okay.
So here is Dr. Devendra Kumar Bezbura, Principal, Kamrup College, Samota. He will be giving the concluding remarks as a webinar host. Sir, please speak.
Okay. I am ready.
Sir, you are audible. Please speak.
Audible.
Yeah, please speak, sir.
Good afternoon to all participants present in the national webinar on modern Indian literature. I am Dr. Devendra Kumar Bezbura, Principal, Kamrup College. I am highly happy to be present here in webinar as because the English department of our Kamrup College, Samota, has organized under the coordinatorship of Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Goswami in association with Department of English, RG College of Commerce, and SMT SG College of Arts, Bonda, in collaboration with Assam College Librarian Association. Now the seminar is going to be over. In this occasion, I feel that all participants and academicians are in a position to gather knowledge through this seminar on different aspects of modern literature, and this webinar help us to create a wide network of the Lahore of Indian literature. On this August occasion, I express my vote of thanks to all the participants of different corners of India and out of India. First, I would like to offer my heartiest thanks to Professor Kailash Chandra Boral sir, former Vice Chancellor, English and Foreign Language, University of Hyderabad, as he has delivered his inaugural speech with a focus on two types of modernity, colonial modernity and vernacular modernity, which enable us to discern some new vista in modern Indian literature. I would like to offer my warm thanks to research person Professor Vikas Sodhi sir, Department of English, GU, as he has presented his keynote address very beautifully, which help us in knowing the multiple dimensions of modern English literature, focusing on writing style of Indian literature. He has also talked about the role of publishers and writers workshop. He stresses on the modern Indian literature in terms of modernity, reality, and ideality. I would also like to offer my warm thanks to Professor Dev Dulal Haldar, University of Delhi, as he delivered his speech on modern literature, stressing on modern outlook and westernization.
Okay.
And all others presenters who are here, I also thanks all of them for their beautiful presentation. In the long run, I would like to say that all the presenters are offered their certificate within this week. At last, I offer my thanks the organizing secretaries and the organization, I mean coordinators. Without the efforts of whom the organization would not have been successfully covered. So I thank all of them. Now I switch my vote of thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bezburasa. Dear academicians and researchers, truly this is an unprecedented time for us to stay and in fact at the same time to continue our professional development to a different online platform. And today we have joined to Zoom platform and Facebook Live. And our association will continue. Ours will definitely continue. We have with us today, we had 50 academicians and researchers from 57 universities, 450 colleges and different institutions. And our association will definitely continue. Actually, we expected that this seminar will augment the process of learn, unlearn, and relearn in the domain of Indian English literature. And I'm sure to a great extent, it has become successful. Thank you for all the brainstorming station, because without you, though it is in a webinar platform, it is not possible to unmute everyone. At the end, we'll unmute everyone. Our organizing secretary, our joint coordinator will unmute everyone. And before that, I would like to say that there's in fact announcement that you're doing the publication of the reviewed papers with ISBN. Both print version and online version will be available. And who can contribute to this book will be selected from the participants and those who have submitted abstracts. Even if you have not submitted abstracts, please you can submit your abstracts even to our mail now, and very soon we'll be issuing detailed guidelines of the book. It will be a reviewed book and reviewed by our resource persons, and it will be published very soon. So we'll be sending you detailed guideline already. And for the last announcement regarding the certificates, we'll be issuing certificates for all the abstract presenters. Those who are presented, not only presented, those who have submitted their abstract, we will issue different certificate to them. And for everyone, those who have registered, we'll issue certificate. But actually, we'll be issuing them a feedback from online feedback form to their email address. And once they fill up their feedback form, they will get their certificate, and it will be done within 7 days. Thank you so much for joining us. Really, I would like to thank each and everyone who has participated in this webinar. Over to Brenda Pal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So I hope the entire program was a quite successful one. And being a host of this entire technical things, it's a great honor for the Assam College Librarians Association ICT Cell. We have a good team working on it. Along with me, Dr. Drupajit Das, the working president of Assam College Librarians Association, is also working along with me for managing the technical things for this program. And it was a great honor to be a part of this program from the point of view of library science background. Thank you very much. And it's a great honor. I'd like to thank Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Goswami, sir, because of whose effort this program could have been a successful one. It was very innovative. I'd like to thank the 3 organizations which are working together for making this program success. And I'd like to thank all the participants who have patiently bear with us for the last 3 hours. So thank you, everyone. And with this, I'd like to end this meeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Please unmute everyone.
Yes. I'm going to end the meeting.
The meeting in 1 minute. Like to say something? Say.
I'm going to end this meeting, sir.
Would like to hear Anamika Chakraborty ma'am's comment. Final comment.
I'm going to end the meeting. Otherwise, it is uncontrollable.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.